Hey everyone, Steve Clark here with the PropsNetwork.com, here with Scott Yager, our entertainment expert. We're going to talk about betting on the Oscars and Oscar pools, giving you the edge you might need for Oscar Sunday. Scott, how you doing?
Love it. Would not rather be talking about anything else.
Oh yeah, this is your thing.
This is my bag.
So let's jump into it. Before we get into any specific categories, let's talk about what goes into creating these odds for the Oscars. I know there's some award shows. I know Vegas seems to have their finger on the pulse here. What goes into these odds that they put up on Draftkings?
Sure. Well, like anything, Vegas doesn't want to lose any money, right? So they're going to put up the odds that are sort of correlated to what is most likely to happen as far as on Oscar Sunday, who takes home the one trophy. Now, leading up to that one trophy, there are several other smaller trophies.
Right.
And within those, there are other nominations and whatnot. So over the course of November to January, February, you have the nominations and awards for the Golden Globes, for the SAG Awards, the PGAs, which is the Producers Guild, the DGAs, which is the Directors Guild, the BAFTAs that are the week before the Oscars. That's the sort of the British Oscars. And more so than the winners, once you kind of get a sense of who's getting nominated at all these places, that checklist starts to make up the eventual nominations list for the Oscars. So, for instance, Best Supporting Actor this year, Brad Pitt, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, Tom Hanks, and Anthony Hopkins, they've been more or less nominated across the board leading up to this Oscars Sunday.
Right.
When it comes time to picking the winners and setting the odds, that's based on how these winners have started to shake out up until this point. And when you start to get a lot of uniformity, that's where you see the huge odds-on favorites, like a Brad Pitt, for instance.
Right.
He's pretty much cleaned up every award show he's been nominated at. That's a minus 2,500 favorite.
Right.
When these awards have kind of gone out to a variety of different recipients, that's when you have the tighter races and the ones that I think are more fun to talk about.
So if we're talking about like the DGA awards for Best Director, what's the correlation there? If you win the DGA, what are the chances you are going to win Best Director at the Oscars? It's pretty significant, I'm assuming.
It's not as predictive as you'd think, although it is one of the more predictive awards to Oscars correlations there.
Right.
It is fairly common for the Best Director at the DGAs to go on and win Best Director at the Oscars.
Right.
Since the DGA Awards are this weekend, we don't know who won that award.
Exactly.
Right now, it's become a two-horse race here, Sam Mendes, Bong Joon-ho. A lot of people have Sam Mendes penciled in because of that big director's win over at the Golden Globes, but the Golden Globes is like 85 random people who picked that.
Right.
The DGA Award are fellow directors.
Totally.
These are the people who appreciate the craft, they understand the craft, and to be honest with you, 1917 is one of the most well-directed movies of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Mendes wins, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they award Bong Joon-ho because they're just approaching it from a different point of view. And I think Parasite's a very well-liked movie. I do predict that this will be the big turning point for really having Parasite become sort of a co-favorite. Right now, it's sort of a slight underdog here, both in director and in Best Picture. I think if Bong Joon-ho wins the DGA award, which I think he very well could, I'm predicting that he does, we start to see a shift and the Parasite narrative takes shape.
Talking about Best Picture now, the same two movies are kind of at the top of the field here. 1917's at minus 200 right now. Parasite's at plus 300. What do you make of this Best Picture field right now?
So it's funny, and this is what makes the Oscars such an interesting thing to bet on throughout the year, or at least to kind of survey the stuff that goes into these lines. As we mentioned, what goes into them, the other awards bodies voting throughout the year, these things flip on a dime.
Right.
Last weekend was a big Guild Award weekend. We had the Eddie Awards, which are the editing awards. The Parasite won that and immediately got shifted into the favor for editing, and it helped its Best Picture odds.
Right.
They then also went on to win the SAG Ensemble Award. Interestingly enough, they're not even nominated for any acting Oscars, but that SAG Ensemble Award win vaulted them into secondary odds here now they're plus 300 for Best Picture, whereas before they were in the 3 spot. And 1917 took the PGA, kind of making it a front runner here. But the movie that I'm leaving out is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which 2.5 weeks ago was the betting favorite.
Right.
And so all it takes is not being mentioned or winning any of these other awards for a couple weeks, and you start to move down the pecking order. As I mentioned, we have so many other award shows in the next 2 weeks leading up to the Oscars with not that much time to adjust.
Right.
So, it being a two-horse race here with Parasite and with 1917, shot in the dark, not likely, but say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood did pick up a DGA award or did pick up Best Picture at the BAFTAs, that gets right back in the race.
Absolutely.
So really interesting time to bet on Best Picture. What's the most interesting and I think the most rewarding for this for all of us is I think a lot of us really, all these movies we're talking about here, I think a lot of people really love all of them equally, and it's very rare that you have a year where the favorites are also literally people's favorite movies of the year.
Right. Yeah, and so if you're looking at the odds right now, before the DGA awards, before the BAFTAs or anything like that, does it make sense? Parasite's at plus 300 right now. If you have some sort of an inkling in your mind that that's going to win Best Director, should you put money on Parasite right now at plus 300, try to get that better value than waiting until the DGAs? Or should you wait, really get a better idea? I guess it depends what kind of a bettor you are. It just depends on if you want to take longer odds or if you want to wait around for more information. But is this a really good value here, plus 300 for Parasite?
Hey, it's possible that I was also the guy a few days ago who told you might want to take Parasite at plus 500 because if they win that SAG award, they might move down even further, which, that ended up playing out. And I'm not saying that this will happen per se, but I will say with Parasite is that it's the movie that right now I think at plus 300, I'd be shocked if that move back into the plus 500 range.
This is the best value you're going to get.
I think so, and I think that it can only move up with the Bong Joon-ho win. Sam Mendes winning, I think, will affect maybe the director's odds. I don't know that Best Picture's odds are going to be shifted there.
Sure.
Similarly with the BAFTAs, I don't know as well because I think 1917 being a movie by a British director, starring obviously British characters, it's sort of a British movie, so it's kind of indirectly expected to do well there. Parasite's the movie that I think the odds are just going to lessen and lessen as far as the value you're getting. If you bet them last week before the Eddie Award and the SAG Awards, you got them at 500 or 5-1, even better. Now it's 3-1. So again, if you like Parasite, which, it's one of those things where sometimes with these narratives, and we'll get to it when we talk about the acting narratives, they get so predictable that voters who still have that ballot in hand think, man, I would love to kind of feel like I'm affecting these races. Doesn't matter who I vote for an actor, it's probably going to be Joaquin Phoenix. Doesn't matter who I vote for supporting actor, it's probably going to be Laura Dern. But I can affect this Best Picture race, it feels like. If there has been a presumptive favorite, it's become 1917 ever since the Golden Globe win. Therefore, I feel like in a year again where people love 1917 but maybe love Parasite more, they might think, hey, maybe I do vote for Parasite here because I haven't been told it's going to win yet. So that's why I do like it as a great underdog play at plus 300. Liked it more at plus 500, but I would like it way more if it picks up a DGA win. But if it does do that, look for the odds to get a little bit less.
So with so many categories headlined by these huge favorites, are there any places elsewhere in the Oscars for some play, like any smaller categories that have better odds?
For sure. And, for someone like me who's obsessed with this stuff, and I also kind of know how these categories are voted on, and I've seen a lot of these movies, so I could tell you how the costume design was, for instance, or how the screenplay was for this movie. It might seem like common knowledge, but for the average person, they might get intimidated by the idea of betting on adapted screenplay and whatnot, or they might take the easy out and pick the favorite in their Oscars pool. I think in some of these categories where you do have a favorite but a slight one, it's a great place to pick up points in an Oscar pool. And it's also a place to actually get some solid, close to even odds on a very well could win candidate. Best costume design is one of them. Little Women is a movie you can't watch and ignore the costume design. It's a period piece. All the colors were vibrant. It's when you look at the poster, you're like, okay, this is a costume design centric movie. It's the favorite, but only minus 167. So I love a play there. Likewise, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, another period piece. I think the costumes were great there. And if you want to not go chalk, per se, and you think a lot of people in your betting pool or your Oscars pool are going to take Little Women, maybe you take Once Upon a Time in Hollywood there. So I think it's a fun category to play with. Similarly, Best Adapted Screenplay. I do think, a lot of people, there's a lot of backlash to Greta Gerwig not being nominated for Best Director. No women getting nominated for Best Director in a year where I think more major contender films were directed by women than in almost any other year. I mean, you had movies like The Farewell and Hustlers and, Honey Boy and all these movies directed by women, none of them nominated. I think Little Women, the most notable because it does get the Best Picture nomination here. And does Greta Gerwig leave with an Oscar, just a screenplay Oscar? If she does, you can get her at minus 167. So I think that's a great play there. If you don't think so, The Irishman, which I think is in that place there, plus 150. Interesting maybe to take as an avant-garde pick in your pool if you don't per se like Little Women to win. Original screenplay is doubly interesting because the favorite, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if you were looking to say the Writers Guild Awards to help you choose once you get closer to and you have all the evidence behind you,
right.
and you're looking at that Oscar pool and you want to say, okay, well, this one at the WGA, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood isn't even nominated because
right.
Quentin is not in the Writers Guild.
That's
It's
right.
not even nominated. So you won't be able to draw from that really any conclusions. But if you do see, say, Parasite win,
yeah.
right now it's a plus 225 favorite. I think that might change if that does win at the WGA. And I think that could be a fun play there to get 2-to-1 odds now if you did want to take Parasite. And then Parasite also could be a fun play in the pool as well if you think that that's going to lead to a larger run for Parasite and you think everyone else is going to take Tarantino.
So with Tarantino not being a part of the WGA, not being up for nomination in the WGA Awards, really, if you like Parasite now for screenplay, take it now because they likely will win at the WGA,
Exactly.
and their odds will get a little shorter.
And it's a nuanced thing where it's like, so it will probably be looked at as a feather in Parasite's cap. I think, it'll be very easy to say, oh, it won there, A plus B equals C.
Right.
So those odds will shift. But also equally so if you like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
right.
I feel like don't let that phase you as much as it might if they were nominated and lost.
Right.
Because they didn't lose. They just
weren't
weren't
even nominated. Yeah.
So I think that the reason that a lot of people have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood penciled in, and for something that's penciled in, minus 167, not terrible odds,
Right.
Is that Quentin Tarantino seems to win that award more often than not when he's nominated.
Right.
And he won for Django, he won for Pulp Fiction, he won for Inglourious Bastards, I believe. So it's one of those things where this might be his time to collect a statue on Oscar Sunday. And if it is, and if you think so, minus 167 is a fun place to do it. And then the last one is editing. So editing, we had a great indicator for who's going to take home this award last week. It was the Eddie Awards, the Ace Eddie Awards. The odds have flipped. Going into that, it was Ford versus Ferrari were the favorite. They're no longer the favorite. Now it's Parasite, which won at the Ace Eddie Awards. I do think there is a lot of correlation there to what wins that award for best editing in a dramatic movie and then goes on to win the Oscar. And Parasite is sitting at minus 134. So right now I would scoop those odds.
That's great odds for that.
So I really like that one too. So really a lot of fun in those smaller categories that the average person might be hesitant to bet on because they say, oh, I don't know enough about editing.
Right.
But you do because you know what all the editors said was the best edited movie 2 weeks ago. You know? So you don't necessarily need to be an editor. 800 editors or whatever it is just told you what they think.
Right.
And a lot of those people are voting again. So especially in the pools, I would say these are fun categories to go a little bit off book. Because the way you win a pool is not by picking all the favorites. Because never are all the favorites going to win.
Right.
Now are all the minus 2,500 favorites going to win?
Most
Probably.
likely, yeah.
So pencil those in. But here, where you have in editing, Parasite at minus 134 and Ford versus Ferrari at plus 200, I'm saying maybe take a chance on a Ford versus Ferrari in your pool, because if that ends up winning, and it would be an upset but a small one, that's a point that you're getting that everyone else who just went chalk doesn't get.
Exactly.
And to be honest with you, I used to do this too. A lot of people use the betting lines as a way to make their picks for their pools.
Right.
Particularly people who don't see a lot of movies and don't have like a dog in the hunt.
Totally. That's it for today, but follow the Props Network for more Oscars coverage here with Scott Yager. I'll see you guys next time.